Hello, hello, everybody. I hope that you can hear me. Seems like the stream's going live here, and we're here looking at our assignment details. It is going to be hopefully I say this every week in the hopes that I give you something that's less than 45 to 50 minutes. But I'm going to say it again this week. Hopefully, this is going to be a little bit shorter so that you can have more time to work on your assignments. Before we do that, though, I actually need to give you the stream link. They kind of changed, YouTube kind of changed how this happens here. It's kind of inelegant. I have to kind of fiddle fart around, excuse my language, and try to find the actual link that I can give you. And then I got to put it on our Blackboard site. So please forgive me. You will see that happening live. The actual there we go. That streamception where you hear the recording going. Okay, and then I got to go back to my main viewer so that I can see my own stream and my chat. It's kind of useful to see the chat, but you know, sometimes it's not necessary. And of course, there we go. Okay, now let's go ahead and bring up. Nope, we want to bring up this here, and then here's the live broadcast link. You're seeing me submit it now. Hopefully, you will receive this in your emails. All right. I do apologize for the lack of communication as well. Man, that password change was located so strategically to interfere with our business. But anywho, here we are. So, the only thing we have on our agenda tonight, folks, is to see an example persuasive speech. Unfortunately, Liz was not able to get me the speech that she had planned due to reasons. So we will have to use another speech that I found on the internet. It's pretty much the exact same assignment. It uses Monroe's motivated sequence, which is the big thing. And it's roughly the same time limit with the same number of sources and the same kind of citation. It's an example speech that I actually pulled from just YouTube. So let's hope that we don't get in trouble for that. But, you know, I'm using this for educational purposes. I'm sure that falls under fair use. In any case, if you want to follow along with me, here are the basic assignments that I gave you. Now, the actual rubric that I use, and I ask you to remember, too, that we are co-opting the group speech assignment that the regular sessions do. We can't order new workbooks just for an online section, unfortunately. So we're using in your workbook, it'll say Instructor's Evaluation Form Group Speech. And for me, it's going to be on page 137. Or thereabouts. You can find it again in your table of contents if you have a different edition, or if you have a used textbook that maybe has the pages ripped out. There'll be a range of pages there for you to see. But anyway, we're looking at the Instructor's Evaluation Form Group Speech. And again, it's not a group speech. It's just because we have to use we're using the same rubric, co-opting the assignment for our own online non-group purposes. Our first criteria here is preparation out of 15 points. To get all 15 points, all you need is an outline with reference list submitted, and that your outline with reference list is formatted correctly. And again, in order to do that right, you're looking for the APA style. And I believe last week we had in that video there was a link or rather a little tutorial about how to use an online citing machine for you to be able to do that well. It also says here audience analysis submitted. You can go ahead and scratch that out because that would be like a whole other writing assignment in paper. And I really would just like for you to reference your survey, how it influenced, maybe not necessarily how it influenced your creation of your speech, but reference some information from the survey that you conducted to get those points. So you don't need to write a paper. You just need it in your speech somewhere. You just acknowledge that you had some information from a survey of this class, and that information was blah blah blah, and make it relevant to your speech. And this is something that I believe we'll see in our example. Okay, and next criteria here is introduction and attention. Again, it's the same kind of introduction and attention we've been talking about this entire semester so far. Gain attention. Did you build interest? Did you state your thesis clearly? Establish credibility? Did you preview the body of your speech? And did you have a smooth transition to the rest of your speech, or rather your body? All right. Now in your body, this is where, in the body of your speech, the next thing on the grading list here is where things get a little more specific, and I might need to maybe add some things here for later. You want to use effective use of Monroe's motivated sequence, which again on this expanded list is right here. You want to have the need step, also known as the problem step, and the satisfaction step, also known as the solution step, and that visualization, which is, I think we've been calling it the call to action. This is where you actually tell the class, what you actually want them to do. And again, we'll see a great example of that tonight. Your main point should be clear. Points supported with examples and analogies. So every time you make a statement, remember that argumentation model we had? Every statement that you want the audience to believe, let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit. Statement you want the audience to believe should have a piece of information. Ooh, boy, piece of information or research to back it up. So you will reference or you'll cite something. So if I want you to believe that cigarettes are unhealthy, I will cite something like the American Medical Association study from 1979 or whatever year that was, so that people know that you didn't get that information from just your own beliefs, but from somewhere that observes real world stuff. Information research that supports what you're saying. All right, remember that's part of that Toulmin model with the claim, data, warrant. The statement is your claim, your research is your data, and your warrant is your explanation about how that data supports your claim. Okay, let's see here. It also says at least 10 sources. Remember that our sources for this speech is 4. Our citations are also 4, not 8, as it says on this grade sheet. So those are 2 important edits there. You should have strong persuasive appeals. Again, we talked about this, where you have the, it says logic, emotional, and credibility appeals, ethos, pathos, and logos. You have language in appropriate detail and vivid, and we talked about effective language a couple of videos ago, so go ahead and check that out and so you get some tips there. And effective transitions. Again, that's was the crux of the last speech, and I feel like all of you did fairly well doing the internal summaries and previews for your transitions. So just keep up that same format. And then finally, you have your conclusion and call to action here. Transition to conclusion was smooth. You reinforce a central idea. Again, this is pretty boilerplate. Summarizing main points and effective concluding statement and call to action. And again, what I was reading from there, and I know that not all of it's written down, but this is from the instructor's evaluation form group speech. All right, so as we watch this presentation today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of take some notes on a pad of paper here, and then I'll talk about what I felt. I've already watched the speech a couple times, or really just kind of 1.5, but I took some notes. We'll talk about some things that I noticed during the speech, things that are good, things that I'll probably recommend that you improve, and then that'll be wrapping up this broadcast. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Also, on this grade sheet here, it is important to note that visual aids is a separate grade for us. That was that 3-slide assignment that I had you do. And that adapted speech to audience thing, again, we don't have to worry about it because that's the kind of the paper. So really all you have to do is that one bullet that says reference the class survey at some point during your speech. That's all you got to do. The other bullet points or the other parts of this rubric are not relevant for that. Okay, so there we go. Let's go ahead and watch this example video. I see that there's not really anyone watching, and that's kind of understandable this evening. So let's go ahead and just transition now to the video here. I'm kind of moving around with my mouse off the camera here, trying to find what I did with the video. There it is. Uh, yeah, it's in this tab here. All right, let's go ahead and watch this lovely presentation, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you what I thought of it and how I would grade it using this rubric, the same rubric I'll grade you. And then hopefully, I hope that gives you some insight into how I think about these speeches and gives you a place to continue to write or continue to complete your outlines and record your speeches. So here we go.
In Seattle, 9 young athletes gathered at the starting line of the 100-yard dash. At the gun, they all started off, not exactly in a dash, but with the desire to run the race to the finish and win. All except one little boy, who stumbled on the asphalt, tumbled over a couple of times, and began to cry. The other runners heard the boy's cry, they stopped, they looked back, then they all went back to the boy's side. Every single one of them. One girl with Down syndrome kissed him and said, "This will make it better." Then all 9 linked arms and walked to the finish line, together. These athletes were not competing on national television. They were not sponsored or idolized, but they were given the opportunity to flourish under the glow of their own spotlight, to feel the brush of the ribbon cross their chests as they ran through their own finish line in their own Olympics, the Special Olympics. Founded in 1968, Special Olympics invited the world to let go of limiting views, unyielding prejudices, and ignorant misconceptions about people with cognitive disabilities, and to embrace the idea that they can be respected, valued, contributing members of society. Just think, one of the kids who ran through that finish line could have fallen into your arms, or maybe one day could be your own child. After working as a volunteer for the Special Olympics and doing additional research for this speech, I'd like to encourage you to become involved as a volunteer for the Special Olympics. We'll start by looking at the need for volunteers. According to the Special Olympics website, more than 1.3 million people participate in the Special Olympics around the world. Participants must be at least 8 years old and be identified as having a cognitive or intellectual disability. There are currently 200 Special Olympics programs running in over 150 countries. So as Special Olympics continues to grow, so does the need for volunteers. Here in Wisconsin, there are 10,000 athletes and 3,500 volunteer coaches. But because of all the individual attention required by Special Olympics athletes, there's always a need for more volunteer coaches, or for loads of other volunteers as well. Now you know the need for Special Olympics volunteers, so the question is, what can you do to help? The answer is, become a volunteer. The most obvious way to become a volunteer is to become a coach. Now you don't have to be a great athlete, you don't have to have any prior coaching experience. Special Olympics offers a general course on the principles of coaching in addition to a mentoring program in which the new coaches receive guidance from the experienced coaches. And if you don't want to be a coach, there's other ways to help out as well. You can work behind the scenes by assisting in fundraising or organizing events or any of the other countless details involved in running a huge organization such as Special Olympics. It's also very important that you know that your contribution to Special Olympics can last from a day to a year to a lifetime, depending on the level of commitment that you're ready to make. No matter how you decide to help, I guarantee you that working with the Special Olympics will be immensely rewarding. As a coach, your instruction and support will help your athletes develop physical skills, while your interaction and friendship will help them develop socially. Rana Vanderslice, author of the article Special Olympics, Beneficial to All, reports that individuals who get involved in sports and recreation through Special Olympics develop larger networks of friends, are more likely to socialize with others, and receive more social support. But it's not just the athletes who benefit from Special Olympics. In my case, working with Special Olympics is one of the most gratifying things I have ever done in my life. Because not only do I have the satisfaction that comes from helping others improve the quality of their lives, but I've met so many amazing people and met so many great friends that really I would not trade the experience for anything. Now you know the need for Special Olympics volunteers, some ways that you can help out, and the benefits for the volunteers and athletes alike. So now I'd like to ask you to take the step of getting involved with the Special Olympics. If you want more information, you can check out the website for the Special Olympics or visit the local headquarters located on Monona Drive here in Madison. I also have brochures with contact information that I'll be handing out after the speech. I know that you may not have a lot of time available right now, but you can volunteer for the time that fits your schedule. The most important thing is to get involved in some capacity for whatever amount of time that you can manage. Remember the 9 children I mentioned at the beginning of this speech. Think of their happiness and their support for one another. Think of how much they gained from running in that race. And think of how you can help others experience the same benefits as they strive to fulfill the motto of the Special Olympics. Let me win, but if I can't win, let me be brave in the attempt.
Okay. Now, let's not go on to that next one. But a big thank you to this Comm 212 SNHU channel for uploading that sample persuasive speech. I really, it was a great resource that I was able to find there. So speaking about our persuasive speech, though, going back to our concerns, so let's go ahead and talk about a couple things that I noticed during this presentation. The first thing that I noticed, and I think you probably noticed it too, was that the speaker's delivery was extremely well polished. And I mention this because, as you might notice on this rubric, there really isn't a delivery part on here. And so my advice to you is simply not to really worry about it. So that's one thing I wanted to say. But another thing, too, is that the person who gave this speech was obviously well-rehearsed and well-coached to give that speech. It's probably why that Comm 212 or whatever class they called it used it as an example speech. However, that is not my expectation for you. I don't want you to seem that well-polished. In fact, the thing that I might criticize about that delivery was that it was pretty clear that it was a performance, in that it was so well polished, the smiles were so well timed, that it seemed like you were watching kind of a movie as opposed to watching someone talk. Speaking, at least in our philosophy, is speaking as a thinking activity, and you should have maybe not these verbal pauses that I am notoriously just kind of spitting out through the web here, but you should look like you are thinking about what you're saying next, that you are looking down at your notes and considering what those notes are and where you are in your speech. You don't have to look like that kind of well-oiled, polished machine. Speaking of looking down at her notes, though, the speaker did do that. And it was obvious that she was, but she did it very gracefully. Again, she was well coached to do that. But if you want, that is a good way to do it. She looked down at the podium, glanced at it, and then looked back up. Similarly, I actually see many of you doing the same behavior, and I think I even commented on a few of you in your last speech that your behavior for checking notes is pretty good as a class, and you do exactly what that is. I see that your eyes go off the screen for a minute or go off the camera for a moment, and then they come back, and you're back on track. So that's not a bad thing. If you need to look at your notes, then it's better to look at them than it is to not look at them and get tripped up and have to start your speech or have a stuttering sentence or something like that. But again, I'm not holding you to her standard in terms of delivery, and that's not even a focus of this particular assignment, as you can see on the rubric. So moving on to the more content-oriented things, this speaker did things that, or rather did not do something that I recommend or require that all of you do, and that is have those in-speech citations. All right, the speaker forgot to say citations, spoken citations with key phrases. I always use the words according to, and I know that makes you sound like a broken record sometimes. But don't worry about the creativity of that. You can with practice we can get more of a flourish with these kinds of things. And if you want to try more key phrases like rather than according to, you can use from, author's name or whatever, author's name, or possibly the publication, like from Time Magazine, written by Fareed Zakaria or whatever. Um, but you need to have those spoken citations with key phrases that tell us the author's name, the publication, and of course the date. I did comment on a few of your speeches from last time that some of us had forgotten to do that as well. And while this was a good speech, like I said, her delivery was spot on, well rehearsed, but she forgot to do these kind of things. She didn't tell us. I guess she told us where, or at least when, where and when that story developed that she referenced in her introduction. But other than that, she didn't mention any other information quite in this format. So I do want you to adhere to this format. Again, it is not as awkward as it might seem. It does take some practice to make it sound natural or insert it naturally, but this is better than not having that information available. The other thing I noticed was that she did follow the same kind of introduction pattern that I recommended that you have. She had a story that gained her interest. She used an anecdote. She built up some interest in that the story was unusual and that you wouldn't expect that at an athletic competition with the athletes helping each other. So that was another way. That was how she built the interest. And she stated her thesis clearly that she wanted everybody to kind of go volunteer at least for a day at the Special Olympics or some other related activity. So those were all things that she did pretty well, and she followed that pattern very well as well. Now, in terms of her body, as we saw, that title card before the speech did say that she was using Monroe's motivated sequence. At least it said the motivated sequence. In my opinion, again, this is just my opinion as a debate coach and someone who looks at persuasive speeches, I'm not sure that she really started to say that there was a need. I mean, she talked about ways that you can help and how helping would benefit you, and that's awesome. I mean, it's a great persuasive technique. I mean, she had those logical and emotional appeals there. But she didn't really establish, the idea that, if we don't volunteer, then unsavory things will happen. I don't feel that she really did that very well, or even really attempted that. And that's part of the key part of, at least in my mind, again, as a debate coach, when you're trying to persuade someone, there's this moment you want to build this idea that the audience is a little bit uncomfortable with the status quo. And again, the status quo is a term for the way things are now. You want them to be a little bit dissatisfied. You want to describe a situation that seems unpleasant, so that they can see that there is a need to change behavior, or that there is a need to change their belief. If you don't do that, it's not as strong as an appeal. And to be honest with you, it was a good speech, but I don't know how many people from that audience are really going to go volunteer. Again, she had the logical appeals about how much it would help you and make you feel better, about what impact it would have on the people that were involved. It was an emotional thing. She seemed well prepared, so she was credible. So she had all three of those elements in there. But she didn't really develop a need step, at least in my opinion. So I'm not really sure it was that effective. So that's kind of how I would have improved that speech. And actually, maybe it's, again, my background as a debate coach, and this is how I'm going to try to coach you right now in this video to make a better speech, is to make sure that there is a need, okay? You should have that part in your speech, especially towards the beginning where people will see that there is a problem in the status quo. And if they don't, like I said, your appeals just aren't as strong. So that's my advice to you. And if I were grading this speech, this is actually where I'd probably take off significant points. I talked about some other weaknesses, but here's probably where I'd start to use the vernacular. I would probably kick her butt on this part. Because to me, without that need step being well developed, it's not really Monroe's motivated sequence. So I probably would have given her, I don't know, probably a B plus rating for her body, and that would have been just enough to drag down the average. So what could have been like an easy slam dunk A would probably be an A minus or a B plus itself as well. Um, and that's really unfortunate because it was, again, someone who has that well polished delivery obviously spent a long time on that speech. And then this is going to be the last little life lesson I think I give you tonight, because really, those were my comments here. They didn't have any visual aids, and similarly, you don't need any visual aids. The call to action was clear, and the call to action was something that you could do as someone in that audience. So that's kind of how your call to action should be. To have someone change their belief or maybe change something in their daily behavior, as opposed to flying all the way to Argentina to volunteer at a mission trip. That's a thing that you maybe can argue that they quote unquote can do, but not many people can take advantage of that opportunity because it is so exotic, I suppose we could say. But anyway, the point is, it was well developed call to action there. So really, the only weaknesses was that lack of development on the need step. But that was enough for my mind to maybe break her down from an easy slam dunk A to a B plus. And the life lesson that I'm winding up here is, again, polished delivery, a lot of effort on that. But to me, that's not the skill that we're practicing. The skill that you're practicing is to create strong persuasive appeals. And I'd rather you have verbal pauses, look down at your notes fairly frequently, but have a really developed need, a really developed solution, and a really appropriate and developed call to action. It doesn't matter to me that you're not giving a performance as you are so much as explaining your thoughts on this topic and what you think should happen. I hope that helps. So yeah, that's the example. Those were my thoughts on it. I hope this helped you in some way. If not, hey, send me an email. I am now caught up on emails. If you are one of those people that email me wanting an extension, it is my intention that my announcement from yesterday answers all of those emails at one time. And if you emailed me with a separate issue, I should have responded. If, however, like a separate issue maybe was embedded in your request for an extension, I may have neglected it because I am just a terrible person. So you might want to email me separate issues again, but hopefully with those extensions, we can all get on the same. We're going to be right. We're going to be fine. So excellent. Thanks for being communicative with me this weekend. I do hope. I know that password changes are kind of filtering through the community at Ball State. My boss actually just this afternoon had to seek my help because I already went through the process of changing their password. It's possible, very strategically timed here, but it's possible that a lot of you can't log into Blackboard until later. So hopefully, if you do have a friend in this course, I do know that a few of you know each other, please do make sure that they get this video link as soon as possible. It may not be that they are receiving emails or that they can check their email. Or maybe that Blackboard isn't sending them links because they haven't updated their information yet. So please make sure that if you happen to know anybody in person, if you're one of those students that are taking it online but live on campus, make sure that your friends have this video link and that they are up to date. So thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. It was a very quiet night, but it was also a very short night. Yay! So again, send me an email if you have any questions. Look at that previous announcement for the new due dates. They are extended for everybody. Have a great evening.